Hello and welcome to this week's podcast, which is Quest Exposed, part of the Questival series, as we're having 2 weeks of special events for celebrating quests. And with me today I have a whole sofa full of JMods, wonderful JMods, starting with...
Hello, I'm Mod Wilson.
Mod Stu. Mod Rowley.
Mod Jack.
And Mod Raven.
And starting with Mod Raven. What's your role at Jagex at the moment, Mod Raven?
I'm a content developer, currently in the community development team.
And what quests might we have seen your work on?
I've worked on Heart of Stone, One of a Kind. I've also done the From Saga series. Sweethack has posted Rite of Passage just about everywhere, so you'll have heard of that. And I'm curator for a number of quest series, such as Bramnix and Penguins.
Super. Mod Jack.
The most recent thing I worked on was The Mighty Fall, and before that, Majorate Memories, although nowadays what I do is I write books and put them in other people's quests.
You add lore.
Yeah. And Lornabs.
And Lornab.
Lornab.
Yeah, I have to take responsibility for that as well.
Yes, you do.
And next.
Yeah, you might know me from such quests as the Ozan Double Bill and Fate of the Gods. But I've also...
I've not heard of that one.
No. Oh, okay. Okay. I've also kind of just done little bits of lore like him, like Jack, all over the place.
The most recent thing I've done is lead development on Dimension Disaster. You might have heard of it.
I hear something about it coming up soon.
Yeah, pretty soon, like in a week or so.
Yeah, I'm quite excited for it, to be fair.
Yeah, also did The Death of Chivalry, Brink of Extinction, Shadow over Ashdale. I think that's it.
Just a few. And Mod Wilson.
It's the pirate quests, including like a rework version of Pirate Treasure. So we're talking about Rum Deal, Cabin Fever, Rocking Out. Then of course there's Olaf quests and reworks of things like the opening quests, so Death Plateau, and of course we've got new ones like Let Them Eat Pie and Bring Home the Bacon.
So you're food obsessed.
They just keep on giving me quests involving food. I mean, Trouble Brewing, that whole mini-game was originally thieving and fire making, and then Mark rolled in and was like, can we also make it about food and pirates?
I think it is always Mod Mark, isn't it? He says, I want another food quest, give it to Mod Wilson. That's pretty much how we get it.
Comedic food quests, yeah. I mean, again, sort of like Let Them Eat Pie was supposed to be sort of like a herb lore, thieving and death tutorial.
Right.
And then it became food related.
If I remember correctly, you originally pitched a ghost story about a drummer.
Yes.
Which Mod Mark rejected, and then you submitted him a food-related quest, and he accepted that.
No, technically I did a murder mystery quest after that, but then apparently there was too many murder mysteries. So
not enough food quests.
Not enough food quests. Too much murder, not enough food.
Sounds like we need to combine the two.
Yeah, food and
food murder.
Yeah,
poison pies.
That's pretty much what you made in that quest. Although Rollo survived, if you can call it surviving.
Technically a non-lethal, humane way of removing him.
Yeah, and removing most of his insides. Yes.
Oh. Okay, so just before we start getting into discussing about how we actually build quests and such, like, what are your favourite quests?
One Piercing Note for me. I love the way it uses sound and the story work so well together.
Right.
Yeah, that was a good one. We filmed a video recently as well, and in that I said the Penguin series, so I suppose I should probably say the same thing again for consistency's sake, but I don't really like them.
He's fickle. Come on, what is your actual favourite? Come on.
It's hard to pick a favourite. I do really like the Penguin series because I love the way that it kind of encapsulates the RuneScape sense of humour. It's the extreme that we go to with that series.
Yeah, there's an extreme level of parody in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, very RuneScapean.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I think Penguin Quests will be my favourite as well. I was quite pleased when I got the creatorship for them because they're just insane. They have that kind of RuneScape humour taking a step further, and I think that's why I love them. They're insane megalomaniac penguin. It's brilliant.
What is not to love?
Exactly.
What's Stu?
All the good ones are taken. I mean, my first choice was one Piercing Note, and the second was Penguins, so I'm on the spot.
No more good quests.
There are plenty of other good quests.
Apart from,
those, I mean...
Rocking Out, Bringing Home the Bacon, these are all of the favourites.
It's so hard to choose. When I was at RuneFest, I was getting players to tell me what their favourite quest was, and I didn't actually have an answer prepared at the time, and One Piercing Note was the one I decided on at the time.
It's very difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, there are so many quests I've just generally enjoyed. It's hard to choose a favourite.
But see, mine's actually Death of Chivalry. So,
Thank you.
There you go.
I would say, sort of like as a whole, the Chosen Commander series.
Right.
Just it's sort of like it again. It has like the RuneScape humor in places, and you're doing all this kind of stuff. But it's also got this more sort of like quite an epic sort of sweep to the whole thing, and just the finale of you snap Zanuck out of her sort of daze, and away you face down the avatar of Bandos and all this other kind of stuff. It was just, it's just like a really nice series, very well written.
And so, to the meat on the bone, how do we go about making quests? Where do we start?
We generally have a core aim, which is either someone has said we want a quest about this, or they've just said we want a quest, go. The second one's often harder to do because you have just a lot more scope and you tend to go a bit crazy. But you start off with a design. Normally Dave writes down a kind of area that he wants thing. Either Dave or Mark. Mark has said he wants some more food with a story about it. So you have these little core aims, and then you go off from there, and you kind of go, okay, I have these vague core aims, which will say like, Hunter, Penguins, Dragonkin, go, and you look at what sort of existing storylines there are, what existing lore there is, and you try and tie in something that weaves it together. And normally our lore is, we've got quite a lot of it, as players will know, but you can normally find a niche and something to start expanding on, something to tell a story with, or at least you've got enough of a hook to write something crazy.
And obviously, especially given the amount of lore and the way that we're focusing on the storylines these days as well, is that there's that sort of like go nuts kind of quest, but there's also sort of like we need the next section in this particular storyline and the rest of it. So that's obviously a lot more focused. That's more of the sort of like we definitely need something over here within this quest storyline compared to just sort of like we need a mid-level quest, make it something hunter related and bacon.
So in that case, where you're building on an existing series, I suppose you're trying to drag in the loose ends and make sure those get tied in or left open again. You almost go back to it and check what its status is, and then progress it forward, as opposed to a very free range form from the type Mod Raven was talking about.
And then in that pre-production stage, we'll then pitch various different ideas. We'll write a short design overviews on different solutions we could create to meet those core aims. Then we'll discuss with our design reviewer which one they like the most. They direct how they'd maybe prefer things to be focused in a certain direction. So then we'll start describing that in more detail, make a more detailed design document that covers all the bases. And we'll do a lot of collaboration and discussion with our design reviewer and getting other people involved and giving feedback to define what this thing is going to be that we create.
Right, okay. And do you then pitch that document, or does that sit in a committee, or does it, how does it get greenlit for the next stage?
So there tend to be a few iterations on that between the developer and the designer, the leads on the project effectively. And you'll just go back and forth a few times, refining ideas, possibly finding new ideas in that process as well to expand out on what you already have. And you'll typically end up with quite a solid, defined design that you're looking to make, that you and the designer and the developer have come up with together. But then at that point, we would open it up to the stakeholders, to the development team in general, just to get a wider sense of feedback of, does this idea fit the aims that we set out to? And then you would just incorporate some more feedback in that way and just keep refining them until you start development.
Right, okay.
Stakeholders would be Mod Dean and Mod Mark usually.
Yeah, it's just generally the term is just people who are involved or interested in the project and seeing it made.
Yeah. So once it's been given the go-ahead and there's been found a slot for it in our development schedule, what happens next?
A whole lot of hard work.
I'd like to point out that pre-production phase is lots of hard work as well.
Oh, yes, but that's only the initial start. I mean, after you get the pre-production out of the way, then we'll get on to development. So we'll probably start with prototyping the parts that are the most technically complex. So we want to try to alleviate the risks. So, for example, if there's a boss fight that has a lot of set-piece elements to it, or we're doing a puzzle that's unusually strange mechanics, then we'll try to prioritize doing those first. Depending on the project, we might try to just get it critically path playable as quickly as possible. So very low frills, placeholder dialogue, just so you can get a feel for the peaks and troughs of the flow. It might be that we try to get it done in a detailed fashion and then present that. A lot of it depends on what the design reviewer's approach is and the complexity of the project.
So that's quite an interesting point, actually, that I imagine quite a few other listeners think we build it in narrative cycle. So you build, you start the quest at the start and you write it in order. But of course, we have to consider risks when we're developing quests. And so those critical pieces that you've got to look at early to make sure you can eliminate those, that affects the development order you work in.
Sort of like in general, we've kind of within our team anyway, because of the way we're working in sprints or Scrum now, is we're kind of splitting the quests up into acts, narratively done acts. So we'll do the sort of the prototyping of any dangerous mechanics and the rest of it, and we'll get feedback on those. The boss, for instance, in the Dishonor Amongst Thieves quest, that got worked on before the kind of the critical path click through, because it had so many additional mechanics that needed looking at. But now we're sort of like, once we've done that, we are now kind of trying to box it off into like the act and get that done and into QA so that we can focus on the next one and the one after that to make sure it all flows a lot more sort of like smoothly. But that's kind of like our team and our kind of approach to it. Everyone's got like a kind of a different approach, just not even within teams. So we're talking like individually, like whether or not they do block it out and do it one step at a time, or if they do the whole click on a row of NPCs on a placeholder map square and then build on top of that.
It's also this early stage that we'd start to bring in artists, so get the concept team working on new character designs, mood art, environmental design, things like that. And then the environmental artists typically would be doing white boxing at this time too, just blocking out all the new locations and iterating on level design just to make sure that we've got some core gameplay that we enjoy, we think is fun. And that's the stage to do it, because you don't want to do that when all the art assets are in place, all the textures are done, because you end up having to tear things out and put it back in again. So it's important to get that in early.
So for those who aren't familiar with the terms white boxing or grey boxing, which I know is part of that process, what's the difference between white boxing and grey boxing, what they finally see? I know we don't have an artist.
If you've ever seen anyone filming against green screen, it's a little bit like that sort of idea. There's the physical location is there, but there's nothing visible, no detail, no textures, no detailed modelling. Often it'll just literally be blank walls, blank floor. So for example, in Broken Home, where the geographical movement was an absolutely critical part of the way the quest worked, we had to get the mansion in immediately. But actually building the mansion was a tremendous amount of work that took all the way up to the end of the development of the quest. So just the shapes of the corridors were laid down. So
you kind of lay out the required pathing.
But they were all just plain blue floors and plain blue walls with absolutely no detail or texture or lighting or special assets or windows or anything at all until about 3/4 of the way through the project, when that started to appear.
And what's grey boxing compared to white boxing?
It's like blue boxing, but with a slightly different colour.
It's like white boxing, but a little bit more edgy.
It's probably akin more to the difference between alpha and beta. Where it's just a further iteration.
It's an iteration stage before we start applying textures and such like. We're at the stage now where obviously you're building critical parts. You're beginning to build narrative. You've got artists coming on. What else is included in that process then? Who else is included in quest development?
So recently we've been involving QA at a much earlier stage since we split into the Scrum teams. So we've got law specialists and such, and they would take this opportunity to kind of bring up any issues that they see with narrative, and they'll be planning like the testing of a project even at this sort of early stage.
Depending on the amount of resource involved, you might get audio involved, particularly with a project like One Piercing Note, which is very music and already focused. If not, then we'll certainly get them involved when it's in a more defined state, so that we can present the environment and they can get an idea of the mood of it from what we've created, and then apply an audio layer on top.
Yeah, we certainly did that with stepping outside of Quest just briefly with the Elf City, because it was such a large project. You kind of want to incorporate everybody really early on.
Okay. we've mentioned Scrum and sprints and such like. So this content you're working on gets reviewed regularly, doesn't it?
So in terms of when things are being designed, so like a design task for, there's going to be a puzzle here, can you fill out the details of this? That would get, sort of like that would be written up by us, sent over to the product owner, who would say, yep, this seems okay. If it needs to, it'll go to QA. And then when we actually make the puzzles and the rest of it, then it tends to go through them and then over to QA, and they'll sort of like look at it that way. Plus, of course, it's sort of like there'll be other people on the team. There's kind of like internal code reviews going on as well. And of course, anyone external to the team who might have a stake in it, like the lore guys, if it's a dialogue section, might also be brought in.
Okay.
It goes through many iterations of feedback. Like, for example, when I was doing Death of Chivalry, I broke it up into an act structure, similar to how Mod also mentioned. And I would then present an act to Mod Osborne, who would then give me several pages of feedback of things that he'd like changed.
He is legendary for that.
And so it'll get shaped and altered as it progresses through development. And often we wind up creating something that's very different from what we originally planned to create in pre-production.
Yeah, sometimes those ideas just only present themselves when you're really far through development, and it's just like you have to do it because it just makes sense for the project. And that's something I really enjoy about quest development, especially. It's just the way that it evolves over time as you're making it.
You discover it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how I write the dialogue. Is I start off going, okay, this is going to happen here, and then as I write the words, new things come in, and I start writing. It just gets pulled throughout the rest of the dialogue for that character, and it just builds up and up.
Well, characters tend to write themselves as you're going anyway. You have an idea of what you want for your NPC, and you start writing them, and then they become quite drastically different as you're going through. It's weird.
Yeah, they take on a life of their own, and they start just deciding that the flow of the content.
I mean, Karapak for One of a Kind was originally written much more pleasant and much less of a kind of sarcastic, character. But he, as he was being written, just refused to behave and just became a horrible, rude, mean person. Which I thought suited the character beautifully in the end, but it was not how the original version was supposed to be.
I've got no excuse for Eli. He started bad and continued from there.
Well, as they've started discussing their own quests and development, we'll leave this half of the show here, and we'll come back tomorrow to discuss more about quest development. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.